to follow our dreams, to raise a family of love and liberty.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Tatiana Show. It's nice to see you here. I'm broadcasting live from my apartment in New Jersey. I'm back. I was in San Francisco last week for Distributed, and here I am back at home. My sleep schedule is a complete joke. I have no idea when I will actually sleep because apparently now my 5:30 a.m. is actually my new bedtime instead of my wake up time. So who knows? I'm really excited to be on the show today because I've got my really good friend Lynn Ulbricht on, and we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Welcome to the show again, Lynn.
Oh, happy to see you as always.
Yeah, same here. So, there's been a lot of news from the Ross camp. There's been some bad, some good. And I know that my audience is really supportive of you guys. And I wanted to give them an opportunity to get an update all in one place because there literally has been about 5 pieces of news that have come out in the past couple weeks. And just because of the Supreme Court ruling, it doesn't mean that people are giving up. In a way, we've actually ramped things up to help free Ross. Maybe you could give us a little breakdown about that?
Sure. Yeah, we've moved really from the judicial to the political because with the denial of Ross's Supreme Court petition, his options for direct appeal to the courts is ended. Doesn't mean there's nothing. It means you can't appeal again. You can't go back and appeal. There is a something called a 2255 that you can do within the year. That rarely works, but we'll try. And that's a whole other, that's trying for a new trial, but we're not counting on it. And so what we are really focusing on is clemency from the president, and that means his commuting Ross's barbaric sentence, not, you don't get a pardon when you're in prison. You usually have your sentence commuted. So just to go back to the Supreme Court decision, because it was really important for not only us personally, but for everyone's, well, certainly Americans, Fourth and Sixth Amendment protections. So there were 2 questions in the Supreme Court petition. One was a Sixth Amendment question, which is the right to a jury trial. And it challenged the fact that the Judge Forrest, used uncharged allegations to basically sentence Ross to life in a cage. These allegations were never proven at trial. They weren't even charged at trial, and they were never ruled on by a jury. Recently, the only charge that was even out there, which was in Maryland, the prosecutor in Maryland has moved to have that dropped. So essentially, all charges against Ross for murder for hire are dropped, will be dropped. I mean, a judge has to approve the government's request, but they've filed for it. So
it's just crazy because that's one of the main things that people are always, talking about: murder for hire, which incidentally, murder for hire still wouldn't hold such a long sentence.
No, 10 years with no victim. 10 years with no victim.
Right.
So, yeah, but it certainly tarnishes Ross's reputation and distorts who he really is to people. And the government used it. They used it at bail to deprive him of bail, and then dropped it. The judge used it at sentencing. They were allowed to talk about it at trial, even though the jury was told, well, you don't have to rule on it, that no murders happened. We're just going to talk about this and not have to prove it. And then she sentenced him based on it. It's absolutely. And then the appellate court, agreed. Yeah, the murder for hire was really drove this thing. And meanwhile, it was never proven, never. And Ross denied it. So it's kind of like, don't we want to have jury trials? Isn't that part of our rights? But in any case, the reason the founders wrote the Sixth Amendment was to protect the accused from exactly this thing. And that's why it says you have a jury of 12 of your peers deciding your guilt, not a judge. A judge can have a lot of things going on. They're a human being. And the founders knew that this was not good. And yet she basically violated the Sixth Amendment right to a jury trial and just went ahead and did it. And it's apparently been going on in the courts for decades. It's a problem. And there's people in prison now based on uncharged or actually acquitted charges because a judge decided to override the jury. This is scary stuff. The other big question was Fourth Amendment, which is, does the government have the right to search and seize our internet browsing activity and history without a warrant? And of course, what we do on the internet reveals all kinds of personal and relevant information. It is, it shows our religious affiliations, our political interests and orientation, our sexual orientation, our medical history and activities, apps, all kinds of things that maybe we just don't want to have public, and maybe they could use against officials and judges and congresspeople to blackmail them if they want, or to persecute people they don't like, or simply to scarf up information about all of us if they feel like it, and they can do it in secret, without a warrant, no oversight whatsoever. And actually, in Ross's case, they also went so far as to aim a directional antenna at his home and track him in his home without a warrant. They can do this to any of us. Okay, so this was okay. Go ahead. Do you want to ask a question or?
Well, no, I was going to say that Fourth Amendment question was just written about in a piece in Fee, actually, and I thought it was excellent. And the title of the article is, "By denying Ross Ulbricht's petition, the Supreme Court has essentially nullified the Fourth Amendment." I think someone's trying to call me. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Anyway, so
they've certainly dealt it a very bad blow, because what happened, we were very hopeful, because what happened was, on the first pass, the Supreme Court did not reject Ross's petition. And it was looking like, and I think they were, holding it pending Carpenter versus US, which they had accepted. And Carpenter was about a cell phone tracking. And they ruled in favor of Carpenter, saying, yeah, you need a warrant to track all of us with our cell phones. You at least go get a warrant, for God's sakes. You don't, okay, you can do it, just get a warrant. They ruled, yes, you have to get a warrant for cell phone, but then they denied Ross, which is basically denying our internet privacy. They don't have to get a warrant. So it's like, really? The internet reveals a whole lot more about me and what I do on the internet than my cell phone and where I go. I mean, they're both important, but it was very disappointing on many levels. And so that pretty much is the end of the road for direct appeal. And so we are turning to a clemency effort and a petition that's broken 34,000 signatures, and it's been I don't know, it was a week ago Friday.
Yeah, let's see where we're at right now.
9 days.
If people want to sign, by the way, it'll be in the show notes. So I just want to interject with that so people know. We're almost at 35,000. So
wow.
Yeah, it's 34,300, and they just come in every few minutes. So it's really great to see people acting, taking some action.
It really is. And it's very heartening for me. It's very heartening for Ross and our family to see this kind of support. And so it's a way to show your support. That's, people are always like, what can I do? What can I do? That's something you can do, and it takes a minute. It really is. It would really be great. My personal goal is 500,000, and I think we can do it. I do.
I think we can too. And also, if people can please send the petition around to different people, along with information, now, because there's so many frustrating things about this case. But one of the infuriating things was people saying, "Oh, murder for hire." And what I like to do is take a tweet by Curtis Green, who is one of the victims of the murder, saying that he doesn't think that Ross did it, and Ross got a bum rap. And so it's great to have these kinds of things that support the original claims that all of us were saying, which is, this is BS. But now it's proven it's BS. The government isn't going after it. But that raises the question, why isn't that something that opens up the case again? Like, the naive average person in this country would say, well, if it's been proven that, like, in writing, that all of these judges were using these uncharged charges, and now they're, unsubstantiated charges, they didn't go to trial. Now they're not going to trial. Doesn't that mean that they have to stop their original plan? I mean, it's really, really unusual that wouldn't open it.
Well, that's what we said to the Supreme Court, and they didn't seem to be worried about it. And it's been going on for decades. Scalia objected to this, in a dissent in another case, same thing. judge found facts, they call it. They're not actually facts. It's really a judge's opinion.
Yeah, and that judge's opinion isn't even right.
No, well, it's certainly the government's not backing it up now. They've dropped all the charges. They might say, but we can all say lots of things. The reason we have jury trials and judgments is because of proof. And people go, well, whatever. And I'm like, it's not because they're nice people that they didn't charge it. They pile on charges. They pile on whatever they can. And, believe me, if they had had proof, they would have done it.
Oh, absolutely. No, they would have nailed them to the cross even more so than they already have.
Yeah.
Now, why can't you, and forgive my ignorance, but I'm sure that other people at home are thinking the same thing. Why can't they just put in another petition with the Supreme Court next year, the U.S. Supreme Court?
It's denied. Well, on another subject or on that subject?
No, on that subject. Wouldn't they be able to? Because they denied it, meaning that I thought that meant that they simply wouldn't hear it, not that they necessarily supported those decisions that were previously made.
Apparently, it means you can't go any further with it. If they had denied this Fourth Amendment question, and we could have gone back. Oh no, I know. If they had accepted the Fourth Amendment question and sent it back to the Second Circuit, and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals had denied it based on that, we could have come back with the Sixth Amendment question. Apparently, by denying his whole petition, they said, no, we don't care. We don't want to hear about it. So that's it. That's the end of the road. According to our lawyers who seem to know these things, there's no other option.
Oh, yeah. Well, your attorneys, you had top-notch attorneys.
Top-notch. Fantastic.
Cannon was amazing, and I know that his whole team over at Williams and Connolly were extremely helpful and supportive and responsive and just
totally.
You couldn't ask for more in a legal team.
It's true. And they were so upset. I mean, they called me the day, that came out. And of course, I was a basket case, and they were so nice and so sweet. The whole team got on the phone. They were so sorry. They were trying to help us out with a few things, wrapping things up. But, they were said, and I said to Cannon, I said, you guys did such a great job. And he goes, no, because we didn't get the result we wanted. And I'm like, Cannon, there's nothing he just takes full responsibility. And he really felt I got the impression that they were very disappointed, that they didn't think it was the right decision, that it's a Fourth Amendment issue that should have been addressed, and certainly the Sixth Amendment as well.
Wow.
But, yeah.
Well, you know what is also crazy, like as a bystander, is the fact that after Ross was already in prison, and, the government contends he's the only DPR. After he was in prison for 6 weeks, somebody logged in as DPR.
Right.
So that
from
alone
that account, from the drug pilot,
to me, that says, okay, that's it. You guys are wrong. Bye. Let him out. But apparently that's also not sufficient, even though that seems like new evidence coming out. There was proven evidence that had been tampered, right? Like they showed that as well.
Well, this all came out after trial because what happened.
So that's crazy to me that you can't go back in.
Because this is something that could maybe be brought up at the 2255 within the year. But the thing is, they can say, well, it's not new because it was in the evidence. What happened was they dumped 4 terabytes worth of material on the defense. That's like Library of Congress times whatever. It's huge. It's impossible. And so it took after the trial weeding through all this needle in a haystack stuff to find this proof, this file that contained this proof. So the trial was over. So now it's possible to bring it back up, but more as as a question. And it's definitely there, but right now it isn't. We'll see.
But okay, so I'm in jail for murder, right? And then all of a sudden it comes out that, maybe I didn't commit the murder. Shouldn't I just get out?
Somebody else did. Right.
I mean, I understand your explanation, but it just seems like, wait a second, I'm glad the trial's over, but if we're in the interest of justice, that seems like something that should be reexamined. Now, I guess the counter to that would be the people that get away with one crime and then they keep getting like whatever. I guess it's like the reverse of double jeopardy, you know, when they keep trying you for the same thing. But I don't know. It seems like if you're really interested in having a just country and new evidence comes to light, despite the burden that it puts on the court, I mean, you know, it's a burden. The amount of money that we spend on prisoners every year, that's a big burden to the taxpayer alone. So even if you're a mean person and you don't care about these people and you think they're dirtbags, like you should still want them out of jail so you're not paying for them if they don't belong there.
Well, a couple of things you've said that are important. One is there is a principle that it's better to have one guilty man go free than to jeopardize all of our rights based on his case. It's not about whether they're a dirtbag or not. It's about the principles involved and what was violated, because it affects all of us. Okay. The
Sure.
second thing is, you said, if you're interested in justice, I have not observed that our system, the way it is these days, is interested in justice. It looks to me like everything's stacked against the defendant, and the prosecutors run the show. And some judges are compliant with this, not all. And that's why 98% of people plea, because they're threatened and bullied by prosecutors telling them, if you go to trial, you're going to lose and you're going to get a worse conviction. And it's actually true. I mean, it's very, very hard to win. And so I went into this thinking, well, you know, our country has a justice system. There will be fairness. I was stunned at what I've learned. And I feel like the principles of our country have been hijacked, and I don't really see that it is interested in justice. And you get caught in this legal, yeah, I'm giving you legal reasons why it doesn't work. They're not just reasons, in my opinion. They're just legal reasons, and that's a different thing.
Wow.
They have their rules, and whether innocent people are in prison or not, they have their rules.
Well, and then you look at all of the asset forfeiture stuff and just how much money they're raping from people. I mean, they're literally just stealing from people rampantly.
Yes.
And then the judges, they can also invest in those prisons where they're putting everybody. So isn't that...
And so can prosecutors. Can prosecutors.
Really?
Yes. They're allowed to invest on Wall Street in prisons. How making money off human beings is not human trafficking, I have yet to be. No one's explained this to me. It's human trafficking.
Oh my God.
And it's such a conflict of interest. Chuck Schumer took $100,000 donation from private prisons. You know, it's like, and he, you know, it's like, whatever.
Yeah, well, Chuck Schumer was a lot of the reason why I think Ross is in prison. So there's something that we didn't talk about, because I think that personally, I don't, know this, but I think that there was a lot of other corruption, maybe higher up. I've posited before. I think that the interest Chuck Schumer had in the Silk Road was more because it was giving Bitcoin a testing ground versus his concern about the drug war.
I agree.
And he has a lot of banking interests, but there was also, Judge Forrest, who passed down this sentence. And I don't know what her history is, but I'm curious as to, I believe that she recently resigned, and I don't think she's that old. No. So now that there's all this kind of shake up with Schumer and the New York scummery courts, right? Because there's a whole bunch of corruption in New York versus Trump. I wonder if that judge didn't step down because there's going to be more rustle ups in that department and that are going to reflect poorly, hopefully, on her, considering her horrible past of constantly giving people life sentences. I mean, you said this judge, thank God she resigned, because she was giving out life sentences like, popcorn at the movies. So can you speak to that? Like, what does that mean? Does that influence the case at all now that she's gone? What does that mean?
Okay, first of all, just so people know, she was recommended by Chuck Schumer to her position on the bench. And the lead prosecutor, Preet Bharara, was his longtime special counsel, good friend, and he recommended him for his very powerful position as lead attorney of the Southern District of New York. So Schumer's all over it. And also, of course, Ross was brought to New York for trial, even though he had no connection to New York whatsoever. He was arrested in California. So, it's just obvious to me. It was very well orchestrated. In any case, as far as Judge Forrest retiring, and by the way, she had attacked apparently a very good judge who was against the mandatory minimums, and that was part of it. I haven't read extensively about that, but that came up in an article on Law 360.
I'd love
So
to see that. If you
yeah,
could
I'll
send
send
us
it
the
to you.
link, maybe we
I
could
will.
also share it with our audience in case they're
Yeah,
interested.
I will. And so in any case, she, I mean, the good thing about her being gone is that she would have been the judge in this 2255 that we're going to file. And of course, we're asking the judge, best judge, to give Ross a new trial. The odds of that were very, very nil. So
Yeah.
at least there's better chance if we get another judge. I mean, that's possible. Um, and just, look, Ross, that year that he got his life sentence, it was the end of May. She'd already given 4 other life sentences. I mean, she's known for harsh
She's
sentences.
like an executioner.
Yeah.
I mean, she's without any remorse. She's just cutting people down.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So now
By the way, just to put it in
Sure.
perspective, the mandatory minimum on Ross was 20 years for his charges. 20 years is long. It's a very long sentence, especially for something you've done in your 20s. It's a generation. She knows very well that Ross coming out at 50, not having been on the internet for 20 years, is not going to go build another Silk Road. Give me a break. Who knows what's going to be happening in 20 years? But that wasn't long enough for her. Neither was 30 or 40 years. She wouldn't have been happy until he left that where he is now as a corpse. This is evil. This is vicious. And of course, very much about the drug war, and but also who knows what else. And substantiating the drug war, and we're doing this. We, meaning our country, is doing this to thousands of people, thousands, and
Millions.
well, as far as, yeah, you're right, millions. But as far as life sentences for nonviolent drug offenders, specifically, and the drug war. But no, yeah, I mean, over 60% of the prison are offenders, many of them nonviolent. And in fact, Ross and some other people in there who are lifers, and I believe all drug offenders, um, are going to publish a picture of them all together with their sentences saying, hey, we just want to go home. We're not violent. We don't want to hurt anybody. Please let us go home and just to our families and our communities. And it's a very powerful picture that'll be up. And it just really brings home, these are people. They're not just statistics. They're human beings, and their children are human beings, and their families are human beings. And there are so many people in the prison system now that it's bigger than 11 states. It could be its own state, and it wouldn't even be the smallest state. It would be the bigger than 11 other states. It's really metastasizing. They're turning our country into a gulag with this drug war and mass incarceration. It's a crisis. It's a
Been a
human
gulag.
rights crisis. Yes.
And what is it like? Well, first of all, I obviously have been to the prison several times and visiting Ross and just seeing all the families there.
Yeah.
What I think has been one of the most powerful tools that we've had is your advocacy, because you're so articulate and because you're kind of speaking for these mothers. Can you talk a little bit more about like the effects on the families that you're noticing? And also, well, I have a follow-up question to that, because, people will say, oh yeah, we're supposed to feel bad for them. Well, what about the families of the victims of the drug users?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I don't think that drug dealers never showed up at my house knocking on my door asking me, like, excuse me, miss, would you like some drugs?
Or forcing you, for that matter. But
right.
yeah, well, look, I mean, okay, I can definitely give you some examples. There's a friend of Ross doing life for user amounts of heroin. It was his third strike, which is this evil law that Bill Clinton brought in. And a lot of people are doing a lot of time because of it. But look, the guy's an old hippie. He had a drug problem. I met his daughter. She's very nice. She was in the visiting room. He's doing life. He wasn't selling heroin. He just had some on him that for himself. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but life, And he's one of Ross's friends in there. Totally nonviolent guy. I've met him. There's another friend of
But these
Ross.
are addicts. This doesn't sound like a criminal. It sounds like an addict.
He was an addict. This other guy was selling marijuana. He got life. He's done 13 years. The prison is in Colorado, of all things. And, he's got a life sentence for selling marijuana, which now, John Boehner's doing. So it's just horrible what they're doing to people with this drug war. So the families, you go in there. First of all, I get to know the families. We spend a lot of time waiting, getting to get in, and I get to be friends with them. I get to know them and hear their stories, which are horrible. We are all in the same boat. We all understand each other. But what really gets to me, and I know it does you too, Tati, is the children. So
Horrible.
we leave, and the kids are so happy to see their dad, or and it's like they're crawling all over him and in his lap and all this stuff. And then they have to be torn away. They're sobbing every time we leave. There are children sobbing, heartbroken children who are being harmed, and will have the better statistical chance of ending up in the prison themselves, keeping that machine going, keeping that product and inventory coming in. And it's just so, so horrible. They don't put dangerous, violent people in the visiting room with us. Okay. I'm not saying none of them have any, it's all drug related. It's all about the drug war that's put them there. Maybe some of them have done some things that are not totally peaceful, but they're not, the sentences are excessive. And these are people whose families care about them. They want to come home. Give them a chance. It's just, but there's a lot of money being made. There's a lot of money being made, and the government is expanding its power and shredding our Constitution in the process, because there's this drug exception. And you brought up civil asset forfeiture, but anything in the courts that's about drugs, well, there's a drug exception. So the Constitution goes out the window because it's drugs.
But why? Drugs have been around since the beginning of time. Literally, you will never stop people from doing drugs, period. If people can, they'll huff glue. I mean,
right.
What are you going to ban glue? It's a human condition. People naturally want to escape from things that are painful for them. So they're going to take whatever they can. Alcohol makes you way more violent, way more psycho. People go around killing people when they're drunk. I've never seen a single pothead do anything violent in my entire life. The biggest fight's going to break out over who gets the last Oreo. So it's just, it's wild. And then when you go into the prison and you see, I remember this one time I was there and I saw this guy, and he just kind of he just didn't look like he came from a good neighborhood. He had an eye that was kind of messed up. And I looked at this poor slob and I thought to myself, dear God, what chance did you have? Because all of those children, you could say, oh, well, they shouldn't sell drugs and they should do better, blah, blah. People have no concept of how decimated these urban populations have been for years and years, purposely infiltrating them with drugs and then ripping the families apart. Yep. What kind of chance do you have if you have no father, if your father's in jail, if your mother's doing God knows what because she's got to make the bills pay? I mean, I don't know. It's such a lack of compassion.
Yeah. But there's also awful. A very strong practical aspect that if people who don't have that compassion might consider. The drug war's been, first of all, when they prohibited alcohol, they got an amendment passed. And then to lift the prohibition, because of course it didn't work, it created the mafia, all this stuff, which it's doing now with cartels. They had another amendment. They have no amendment with the drug war. They just decided that they have the authority to do this federally, So that's that. It's an encroachment of power. It's expanding their power. But the other thing is, it's been going on now for over 45 years. Taxpayers have paid over $1 trillion. And I'd like someone to tell me how it's been a success. People are still doing drugs. As you say, they always will. And prohibition does not work. It's been proven. It's so obvious. So I have to say, even the government, which is so incompetent, right? They know this. That's not why they're doing it. It's very
about control
and money, and it's a great jobs program. I mean, the 5 biggest lobbyists, besides the cartels who are not a formal lobby, the 5 biggest lobbyists in Washington
Jobs program for them too.
are pharmaceutical companies, because, you know, CBD is much, I've been told, this is anecdotal, but I've been told by people who've been given, you know, opioids for pain, for legitimate pain that was awful, and they turned to CBD and it was so much better and helpful. It's threat to the pharmaceutical companies, alcohol and beer companies, but also the prison guard unions. I mean, they'd have to close prisons. The towns
police.
around where and the police.
They'd have to shut down the police stations. They wouldn't have enough money.
Yeah, well, the police, the police unions are another of the top lobbyists, and the private prisons. So here we have all these interest groups engaged in human trafficking.
Unbelievable.
And all of these towns around near where Ross's prison is, they depend on the prisons. This is a very, if the prisons, if the drug war ended and the prison, everybody who was involved in the drug war that's in there was let out, that place would go into a complete depression. I mean, it would be disastrous. It's terrible. And you can multiply that by, you know, prisons all over the country, which they are continuing to build new ones, by the way. And they're getting ready for more. You know,
let's make some new jobs.
Keep going. And I
Unbelievable.
even have the, you know, call me a paranoid conspiracy theorist, but I think, you know, it's kind of scary to me that they're building all these prisons. It's like, so who all are you putting in there? Like, how many are we? You know, there's a book, 3 Felonies a Day. We're all breaking the law. And, you know, it's like, so, you know, I met at PorcFest a woman who is in prison right now. She wasn't at PorcFest. She knew she was going to face it. I felt fine with this woman. We were around a campfire together. She's very nice. And it was a Bitcoin-related crime. And she's in prison. And the prosecutor said, she's trying to undermine the economy of the United States. And I'm like, really?
Oh, my God.
They got her in prison. You know, it's like they're very quick to throw people in a cage. They're quick to do it now.
Well,
it used to always be this way. Before the drug war, it was not like this.
You know what makes me the most sick is freaking Hollywood, because all they do is show me all these TV shows about how just it is, and this judge was worrying, and this lawyer is so innocent doing all this pro bono, and this copper, he was never corrupted, and there was one small little corrupt element, but he got rid of it, and they were over it in 30 minutes or less. I mean, it is such a propaganda BS piece of trash that is brainwashing people into complacency about a very real, very disgusting element of our society. I mean, this is an illness. You've got, what's that, Hasper guy, whatever. He was the head of the House.
Right.
And
Danny Hastert, yeah.
Yeah, and he went to jail for molesting multiple children. He went there for 13 months. 13 months, and he's a child molester. And then you've got like, oh, I sold some joints. Oh, 40 years. That's for you, buddy. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. And it makes me so furious that people can just, you know, glaze over and think that everything is okay. I mean, I'd love to see more artists and Hollywood itself kind of pushing back against this, because it should be a popular subject. I mean, this is the people's fight, right? The lobbyists that are lobbying, those are the special interests. Like, what about the interests of the actual people? I would love to see the art reflecting that as well. And
absolutely, because culture influences policy.
Yeah. Well, I think that you know, that's going to be where the battle is fought for Ross and for all of these people. It's a culture battle, and I hope that, you know, with this case, there's almost like a galvanizing moment. That's what I'm hoping to participate in. I'm sure you too. Is not just to free Ross, although obviously that's the priority, but really to cause that tipping point where things start getting back to sanity. I mean, you know,
back to, how about the good old days before the drug war, when half the cases brought to court were the judge would say, okay, a non-jail time. You know, you do time outside of the jail. Half of them. And you know, it was a steady 180,000 for decades and decades and decades, and all of a sudden it's 800% higher. Quintuple the life sentences. There's 5 times as many life sentences now given than there were before the drug war.
And they're making them into criminals. These people, what are they going to do? How are they going to get a job when they get out of there? You know what I mean?
Criminal training program to go into that place. You
Yeah,
got
why go to college? You can go to jail.
yeah. You know, you learn all kinds of skills. You have to, because you've got to survive. And yeah, no, people join gangs that weren't in gangs. They, you know, all kinds of stuff goes on. It's such a joke. They call it correctional. I'm like, really? I think it's a criminal training program. It's not correcting anything.
Yeah, no, they're
And
correcting any good behavior they have. They'll be like, oh,
yeah,
no, you don't want to do that. Come over to the dark side.
yeah, right. You won't come back into prison and make us more money. So, you know, look, I'm sure obviously there are people that society needs to be protected from, but that is not the majority of people that are in prison, in my opinion, what I've seen. And so, yeah. But even if
Well,
you're not in prison, listen, it's like your rights, they're being shredded with this thing, your protections.
they absolutely, I mean, this is something that really ripples out over all of us. And Ross has also done something kind of wild the past week. So, you know, you've got the change.org petition. We've got Forrest leaving. We've got the dropping of the murder for hire. We have the whole Supreme Court fiasco. And Ross is on Twitter. What's going on?
Yes, Ross
So,
decided to, for the first time probably ever, because he wasn't really into it even before his arrest, get on social media. Yes.
so that's wild. So how can people follow along with what's going on with him? It's the handle is at Real Ross U, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so people
And
can go there and see what he's thinking about, and more importantly, spread the word and sign the petition. Everybody,
yeah,
please
yes,
spread the
please.
word and sign the petition. A retweet is very nice, but a retweet with the petition is even better. So,
Absolutely. Please
you know,
spread the word on the petition, because that will, if we can get 500,000, which like I say, I think we can do it if with everyone's help, it gets the attention. It gets attention, and it shows support and shows that, hey, maybe there's more to this case than I've been reading about in the media or the government says.
you know,
Um, mhm.
I'd love to do like a quick call to action on your behalf. You know, if people out there are listening and they have any good suggestions for PR companies, any kind of like connections to people in government, any kind of
Yeah.
connections to people that might want to potentially retell this story in a way that's favorable to the family, you know, maybe people in the entertainment industry, just anybody from all different kinds of
Celebrities who were willing to wear a
yes.
Free Ross T-shirt and tweet it, you know, just any kind of, but connections and political connections that's how we're in the realm of politics now, and that's what happens. You have connections. That's what helps.
Yeah, so I just want people to kind of like rack their brains, because the more of us that can kind of put our efforts into this, the better it is. I'm always overwhelmed with how much love I see around you. You know, we always travel around together, and
Yeah.
it's crazy how many, you know, well, I thought about this and I know this person, and all these little
Yeah.
tiny things really do add up to progress. So
Yeah.
if you're out there and you're listening and you think, hey, I think maybe I could help, where can they email you?
Well, they can always reach me through freeross.org. There's a contact page, and there's Lynn at freeross.org. And, you know, but also you just go to the freeross.org and go to contact. It's at the bottom, it's in the, footer. And I try to answer emails. You know, sometimes I get behind and all of that, but yeah.
Well, you always
I'm
need
hoping,
volunteers too. So if people want to help volunteer and you're responsible, not
yeah.
regular people that are irresponsible, responsible helpers, please apply. um,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
would be
this is
great. Hmm.
where's the case history, by the way? We were talking about that. I know that
It's
the
not
case history.
published yet. It will be
Okay.
very soon, hopefully soon, very soon.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I'd like to, you know, we're not going to obviously talk about that when it launches, but really quickly, I know it hasn't come out yet, but it'll be out soon. What is the case history? It's just detailed information about what happened, like with court documentation, or what happens there.
Yeah, it's all it is basically making known and pulling together public information. Nothing, not my opinion, not our team's opinion, nothing like that. It's basically spelling out and linking to public documents. And basically we're saying, if you want to really see what happened with the investigation and all of that, you might want to check it out, because it's all documented and it's not very commonly known. And you can draw your own conclusions about what you think. If you think Ross was treated fairly, and if this is a dangerous precedent or not. Personally,
Yeah.
it's pretty eye opening. even to
Well,
me.
it's like,
I knew a
how would
lot.
you feel if that was your brother, you know,
Or
or your
you.
sister, or
Yeah.
you, or your or cousin? You know what I mean? People, when they think about jail, they think of it as, I don't know,
Someone else.
just bad
Someone else.
people, right?
Right.
Just But you'd be surprised how many very, very good people are in there
True.
and how many people are suffering as a result. So,
It's true. Ross said to me, he goes, I haven't met one really evil person in here. There's people who have problems. There's people who have made really bad choices. There's people who are obnoxious or different things, but nobody that's evil. It's like they don't deserve. So many people in there do not deserve what they've gotten, and
well,
neither do their kids.
I mean, it is definitely heartbreaking. I encourage everybody to sign the petition, maybe send Ross a letter, maybe send somebody else a letter in prison. You know, there's all these different people there that are so lonely. I hope that people take an interest in this because, I like to complain a lot. It's one of my hobbies. But you know what? Once I saw how good I have it, it's really important to be grateful for the small gift of not being in a cage because some arbitrary, prosecutor decides to go overzealous. And I mean, Ross's case is an extreme case, but there are smaller cases. And look, if you lose 10 days of your life to a prison, unjustly, look, if somebody's a bad person, they're a murderer. Okay, let's not give them, vacation at Club Med. But the rest of the people, it's not a good way to build a free society. So
Not at all.
hopefully we'll see a push. Anything else that you want to tell everybody before we sign off?
Just that this case is bigger than just Ross, and we are trying to support others in there too as best we can. And that honestly, I think you and I agree with this. It's like we're at a tipping point in history right now. We're in the digital age now, and the courts are operating in the back last century, and things are being decided right now that are going to affect all of our freedom in the digital age. We can either go forward towards innovation and freedom and individual choice, or we can have more government interference and control. And it's really a tension between those two things. And if people don't pay attention, it's just going to slide right over into tyranny. That is my personal opinion. It looks to me like we really have to, pay attention right now while we still have the chance.
Right.
And Ross's case is one of those cases, and I'm hoping it'll shine a light on this situation and have people see, wait a second, this isn't right.
It's not right, and it's also not even good for the country because what's going to happen with the crypto people is that, for example, when we talk about invasion, they're all going to leave, because it's physically unsafe in the United States. The United States is supposed to be like a beacon of freedom and entrepreneurship and all that, and the very foundations of our country are being rocked right now. And thank you so much for all that you're doing. I know that Ross, I'm sure, appreciates it, and we all love you guys.
Love you, Tati. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And really appreciate your friendship and support all these years.
Oh, for sure. And if everybody wants to go to change.org, there's a free Ross petition. Go to free_Ross on Twitter, and you can follow along on the latest news if you want to follow Ross, Real Ross U. And thanks so much, Lynn. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Sure, of course.
All right, keep the fight. Hope alive.
Absolutely.